All right. Well, welcome again, everyone. I'm Mariah Lichtenstern, and I'm so happy to see all of you here today for Global Entrepreneurship Week and FourthWave's Funders and Founders panel with our esteemed guests. We have today with us both founders and funders, so both sides of the table. And so we're just going to go ahead and jump in with some introductions. On the investor side, we have Marianne and Ori. And on the founder side, we have Ashita and Anu. And they're going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about themselves and their respective organizations. And then we'll jump into some questions. So over to you, Ori.
Thanks so much, Mariah. And hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. And thank you so much for having me. My name's Ori Cifuentes. I'm an investor at How Women Invest. We are a fund that is powering the next generation of female founders. We invest seed to Series B. We're now on our Fund 3, so we're actively fundraising and making sure that we can build a new fund to start supporting female founders at later stages. And some of you might have heard of our sister organization, How Women Lead. That is our nonprofit arm where we really work towards getting more women on boards, more women as LPs, and more women as fund managers. So we're very big on a systemic approach to making sure that we have more women across every seat at the table. And we're really excited about the future. So excited to be here and excited to learn from all the panelists as well.
Marianne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marianne. I run a venture studio for early stage startups. I'm also the founder of Women Founders Bay. We're on a mission to increase the number of funding going to women. So we run one of the largest and most active communities of tech female founders here in the Bay Area. We have over 500 startups, all female founded. And we are trying to change the face of tech in Silicon Valley by throwing events, putting women on panels, giving women voices on social media. And we have free workshops and events every week for women to help grow their startups.
Awesome.
Hey, sorry, Mariah. I'm Anu Privateer. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Ananya Health. We are a medical device company that builds a cryoablation tool
Mach langsam! Bruder! No, it's not working.
We'll get that sorted out. Sorry about that, y'all.
Yeah! Mach langsam, Bruder! Mach langsam, Bruder!
Let me see if I can mute everyone. I think we have
Did anyone see who that participant was? I apologize.
I think I muted everyone.
I think it's that Dr. Kurdi Turk is just someone who's Zoom bombing, I think.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a limited view.
All right, y'all. We'll try that again. Hi, I'm Anu Privateer. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Ananya Health. We are a medical device company that builds a tool to prevent cervical cancer at any primary care clinic anywhere. So most patients get screening for cervical cancer at primary care sites through a pap smear and HPV test, and generally get referred out to outpatient clinics. So we lose as many as 40% of women who screen positive. They don't follow up in the next step of care. So we're building a tool to make sure that they can be treated right away for cervical pre-cancer. We're a seed stage medical device company. We went through the FourthWave program in 2020.
Awesome. And Ashita.
There you go. I wasn't able to unmute myself. Sorry. Thank you, Mariah. I am Ishita Shah, and I am a founder and CEO of Microbials. We are an anti-infectives company, essentially a therapeutics company, developing what women need, essentially novel ways of delivering vaginal inserts so that we can reduce the burden of recurrent bacterial vaginosis that impacts nearly 21 million women in the US alone, but globally, about 1 billion women are impacted by secondary clinical complications that remain unresolved because of bacterial vaginosis. I come from the UC Davis Milk Bioactives program, where we initiated this research. And so I began this journey as part of discovery at the university, which then led to translation of a lot of the compounds that we identified here. And so for the last 3 years, I've been actively trying to develop them in a way that we can get to the clinic and we can try and resolve these infections for many women in their reproductive age groups as part of the FourthWave cohort in 2021. And I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you both returning alumna. That's wonderful to hear. So just going back to the investor, the funder side of the table, Marianne and Ori, what are the most important factors that you consider before investing, and what are some things that female founders should keep in mind when they're fundraising?
Yeah, I can start. So the most important thing that I look for, especially at the early stage, is really the team. One of the things that I want to see is that the founding team has a competitive advantage, right? Whether it is a network that no one else has, whether it's expertise that no one else has, whether it is even a distribution channel, or do you have an audience that you can sell to? So what is something that differentiates you from everybody else? Because right now, when you have a unique idea, or what you think is a unique idea, is no longer a competitive advantage, right? Everybody can have that idea. What matters most is your execution and your ability to execute, and your ability to then sell your idea to your audience. So that's one of the things that I look for. Specifically for women founders, what I recommend is that unfortunately there's a lot of biases in the pitching process. One of the things that I recommend is, one, find a network that you can lean into, that can introduce you and do warm intros to different investors, to different founders. Build network around you of women who can support you and elevate you every step of the way. And then one of the other things that I recommend in fundraising, when you are pitching to investors, and always tell them a vision, like tell them the dream, why you're going to be the next unicorn. Women always tend to be very humble, but when you want to get the investor excited and you want to show him that you're going to make $1 billion within 5 years, don't be afraid to go big, so that you get them excited on your vision.
Yeah, I think a ton of gems that Marianne shared, and I feel like I learn something every time. I would love to double click on the importance of team at the early stages. So I think oftentimes something that I think makes a lot of headlines is the need to have a technical co-founder. And for some women, they might be the technical co-founder, right? But the reason I bring this up is because ultimately, venture capital is really based on the foundations of investing in technology and investing in these solutions. So I would definitely love to expand on the fact that if you are still in the process of identifying your technical co-founder, or if I know sometimes women want to be a bit humble about their background and their expertise, I would say fundraising and building a company is definitely the place where you want to amplify yourself and amplify that network of tech expertise. And I would love to also advocate for the fact that when you're early on, this is also where you can leverage advisors as well. So in the case that you're building in health or you're building in deep tech, having the right advisors on your team also is another way investors can vet, okay, great, you're going to have the right folks as you're navigating some of these really complex and highly regulated areas. So I always advocate, when female founders are fundraising, try to get ahead of these questions. And ultimately, investors are just trying to de-risk, right? Why is their money safe with you? And so I would ask yourself that question as before you pitch, as you're pitching, because the more data points you provide an investor, it's really, really hard to argue against the data, right? We're taking the bias out of most of it. We're taking the tone out of most of it as well. So I think the best female founders come prepared with all the statistics on why they're going to win, and to Marianne's point, why this is a huge market. And for any folks that are on the fence about whether it's my technical ability or anyone on the teams, you're already ready with the answer. And if anything, the key hires that you're going to make because of the round that you're trying to raise. So I think sometimes that question ends up really getting into tricky territory. It doesn't have to be tricky. I think at the end of the day, investors just want to make sure that at the end of the day, your product is tech, and 99% of the time it is. It just depends on how you share it and how you say it.
Thank you for that insight, Ori. So team is definitely important. Execution is what it comes down to at the end of the day. And advisors are golden in helping to navigate that process in the earliest stages, especially while you're still building that team. So going over to the founder side of the table, Ashita and Anu, you both have experience raising capital. Let's talk a little bit about dilutive and non-dilutive fundraising and what your respective experiences have been. Let's start with Anu. All right, now we had that Zoom bomber, so.
No, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, so as a company, we've raised a little bit under $2 million in equity, and then a little bit over $2 million in non-dilutive funding. So we've definitely seen both sides of that. And I'm laughing to myself or smiling to myself when we talk about advisors and networks. I come from the medical device industry. I'm an engineer by training. I've been in med device R&D most of my career, and our very first angel investors reflect that mix, right? We have a lot of people that come from that background as well, that have stayed with us in that journey, that have provided their time, their expertise, that have helped us get the grants, that have helped us get the clinical relationships. One of them has become our CTO. So we know that, pulling those people in really for the long haul has been a big part of that journey. And some of them have invested a couple of times into the company. So that's always really great to see, not just money. I mean, money is great. It's oxygen for an early stage company to be able to do the things you need to do. But when that money comes from people who can also help guide and direct, hey, here's some pitfalls that I have seen in this process where I have, started a company or raised money, or here's some things that I can help you with. And really, that's one of the early stage investors we have helped us get our first set of NIH grants. So we have a phase 1 NIH grant as well. We just recently awarded a phase 2. And those are, the way that investors love to see traction and love to see a big market. I think NIH is similar, right? They want to see data. They want to see a strong technical team. They want to see that you have the capabilities to do the things you're going to, you say you're going to do. And they want to make sure you've got the administrative structure, or starting to build that administrative structure to be able to manage that money well. So it's really helped us at various stages. We've sort of gone like grant, equity, like in that cadence. And it's really helped us grow and scale the organization, as well as, do the technical things that we need to do.
Ashita.
Yeah, it's this is such a great discussion, so close to my heart and every day in my life. But what I'll jump in is relevant to every company building. As part of like the 3 angles of a triangle of a company, I like to think of number 1, your technology. It has to be really rock solid. Second is team, and that team has to be able to carry out everything that the technology is enabling you to do. And the third is obviously treasury. So that seems to be many times a bottleneck in early stage funding. And what I mean by that is one has to be very open to taking a multi-pronged approach. So we've looked into both venture capital, angel investments, but really grant funding as well. And as part of what helped build out that portfolio is really good advising, specifically in the biotech industry, as part of what we are trying to build, especially if you're going after something that's first in class and best in class, which are the high standards for any novel biotech, product. that's where we need a lot of early stage advice. We may know all of the research areas, but how to translate it, how to clinically develop it, all of those things remain to be understood by the founders, but also by a larger team that hasn't been a part of an exactly similar product throughout their career in the beginning. So early stage advising is very key to initial success, but then also becoming part of accelerators has been very meaningful. That has been sort of fuel for us in terms of navigating the pathway to getting fundraising success at that point. We've been awarded an NIH Phase 1 grant, but we also lucked out with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that helped us de-risk our technology even more. So as part of high-risk projects,
tells
which
me
we
that
describe.
wasn't luck, Ishita.
Well, I like to think of it as continued de-risking. And so that also, you can do everything that is in your capacity. And yet things do have to shape up in terms of the technology continuing to prove itself meaningful as part of additional work that you're developing. So I think, we've continued to build it that way. Every opportunity that has come our way, we have, without being shy about it, taken it, and we've searched more and more opportunities throughout our time here. There have been many challenges as well, but despite that, I think one thing that continues to keep us going as a team is work with what we have on the day off. And build from that. Like, what can we do with money that we have right now? Can it still help de-risk it? Can we still meet that one more milestone so that if we have a secondary conversation with an investor we talked a year ago, do we have anything to show progress? And that's very important for us as well as teams on the other side, because they do want to see progress with what you have at that stage.
I want to piggyback on that, Ishita.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were having a discussion this morning on my way to the office about, okay, what can we do in the next, we're coming up to the end of the year. We just had this big kickoff meeting. What can we do between now and like the end of January that really accelerates that progress, right? How can we apply the resources we have, maybe in a different way, maybe front load some of that to get to the next milestone quicker and more meaningfully. So I love that, like, look at what you have in hand right now. What can you do with the team you have that can get you that next hire, that can get you that next fundraising milestone, but can, like, moves you ultimately closer to the product? Because everybody loves traction, including, when you're trying to recruit team members, right? Investors obviously love it. Customers love to see it. And then team members love to see it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone who you want to bring on board has to be truly just as excited about that whole journey. The mission and vision, all of that have to be aligned in that same space. But it's such an exciting journey, I'll tell you that, despite early stage issues that I think are part of the whole process. We are still supercharged about continuing where we see ourselves going every day. Stop there.
So yeah, just going along those lines, when you're going out and fundraising, there's a lot of pitching and trying to communicate the execution, right? Trying to communicate your progress, your market, your solution, distinctions, competition, and doing it all within oftentimes 5 minutes. If you're in a pitch competition or doing an accelerator where there's a demo day, you're balancing like all this execution and then being able to communicate that to stakeholders when you're out there fundraising. So, starting from the investor perspective, you're hearing these pitches and trying to extract this understanding of where founders are at and their business models. So just from the investor perspective first, what elements really make for a strong pitch, and what are the things that detract from a presentation?
Yeah, this is a great question, Mariah. And I think I love that we highlighted, pitch competitions versus the demo day versus the fundraise. I think I really want to take a step back and like emphasize that these are 3 different audiences every single time. And of course, 3 different objectives every single time, right? Usually for the demo days, yes, there's a glitzy prize or recognition that happens. That's really great. Sometimes these pitch competitions also are just meant to showcase and bring together like-minded individuals and investors. And in the case of the fundraising process, you're pitching to the partner, you're pitching to the team, you might be pitching to different partners depending on how big the fund is. So I think the one piece I would always advocate is I can tell when a founder did their homework, because if I get the same pitch that I got when I saw your demo day, that means you didn't really research our fund, and or what exactly are we looking for, right? At How Women Invest is going to be very different than Marianne's group, very different than another accelerator, for example. And so I definitely want to highlight here that yes, the audience and the who and the why is critical, but you're also going to have to tailor it every time. And I know in the age of AI, you can spin up 50 variations of your pitch deck, and I think that's great, and it's going to save a ton of time. But at the end of the day, what AI won't be able to do is automate that person telling the story, right? And because a lot of this is really critical to basically pre-seed up until your Series A, most of the investment is still on the team and the person. As much traction as you have, I think at the end of the day, it's really how you weave everything together to get someone to say, okay, let's move forward, right? What's that next step? And I think if you're able to just really prepare, like I said, I think that's to me what really makes a strong pitch versus someone who's like, okay, this is my fifth pitch of the day. Let me run you through it. And it's also ironic. Sometimes founders say that on these calls. Hey, this is my seventh pitch. Let me just walk you through it really quickly. And I sit there thinking, like, you're building this company for more than a few days, right? You're going to be building it for years and years and years. So walk me through why you're so excited, right? And what's that like generational vision? Because of course, as an investor, I think we're all honored every time we get a pitch. I think it's a privilege as well. But I think founders also have to remember that like this is one of the few times like you're in the driver's seat, right? You get to really control that narrative and that conversation. And so I would love to advocate for the research and the prep, because you can definitely tell when someone's, you know, not doing their demo day pitch and they're really pitching to you, the fund, the person. And that's the power of LinkedIn and social media as well. If you know someone is really deep in the weeds in your sector, you probably can skip the slides grounding them in the research and the data, right? If anything, you might bore them, or sometimes maybe say that they might not know the space as well as they do. And then that way you can spend more time on you, the product. And so that's just another small example to kind of illustrate how you can kind of play to these different audiences and cater your pitch. But would love to hear what Marianne has as well.
Oye, you brought up good points. Always be prepared before pitching to investors. One of the things that I recommend is instead of pitching kind of just your idea and your numbers and the fact, pitch your story, pitch your mission. At the end of the day, investors are people and they relate to a story. They want to hear why you started this company and what drives you. For example, there's a woman founder that I was advising, and she was building a kind of a medical device for cervical cancer. So she could have started the pitch with, okay, you know, what is the problem? There's cervical cancer, and we're building a device in for that. But then I recommend, well, share why you started this. So instead of pitching it like that, she started, well, my best friend had cervical cancer, and I wanted to help everybody else around me who had that because I saw her go through that issue. So instantaneously, you're pulling people into your pitch and your story. So that's a big tip to get you funded. And the second thing is, and that's specifically for women founders, there's a study at Harvard that evaluated, okay, how are men pitching and how are women pitching to investors? And they found that even though both, let's say, have similar startups, have similar numbers, men get the funding at a higher rate than women. And the reason why is very surprising is because when investors hear a pitch and it's by a woman, they tend to ask like preventative questions, like pessimistic questions, like how are you going to make sure that you're not going to go bankrupt? What are the risks in your business? But then when they ask the men, they were like, how are you going to be the next unicorn? How are you going to make your first $1 billion? So instantaneously, women are put in the defensive position. And when you are trying to defend yourself, you're already not winning. So instead, what that study found is when you are answering those questions, answer the reverse question. So if they're asking you, what are the risks in your business? Instead of saying the risks, say, what are your advantage of your business? If they're asking you, how are you going to make sure you're not going to go bankrupt? Answer about how you're going to make sure that you're going to be the next unicorn. So with these two tips, I think you're going to be well on your way to raise funding.
I love that you're giving those, highlighting what the solutions are and how to deal with that, because oftentimes you just get sucked into these traps, not even knowing what they
Exactly.
are. But if we're aware, then we can be proactive about addressing that and hopefully overcoming some of the cognitive dissonance that we as women in particular face. But it's well
Yeah.
worth us overcoming, because obviously we see how much value we bring to the table when we do overcome. So yes, I'm seeing in the chat too, amazing insight, absolutely. So going back to the founders for a moment, Ishita and Anu, what do you wish that you knew early on about pitching, and what advice would you give to other founders, whether they're going through these different, audiences of the pitch competitions, the accelerator demo days, or actually going to individual specific investors and pitching them? What do you wish that you know, and what advice would you give?
There's no shortcuts to it. I'll start with that. You have to be extremely open to improvising continuously. It's a process that comes with practice, I think, in terms of being an expert at pitching. I kid you not, like I couldn't go back and look at my very first pitch deck or my very first 1-minute video that I created prior to our Y Combinator demo day. You know, it takes so many trials to continue to hone in the message that you're trying to give without being either overtly technical or overtly casual. You just have to make that a really fine balance so that you're clearly conveying your message and your mission and why you could be the one or the company could be the one delivering the promises that you're making. And I think that's really crucial. But besides that, I think the early stage advice that we got, whether it was scientific as well as from YC partners, that was really meaningful in terms of simplifying how we spoke about our project. So many times, the caveat of being a scientist for too long is you're talking very deep tech work to any and everybody, and that's not very easily understood. So if you just get that 1 minute where you have to convey those crucial 5 points about why what you're building is really important and can be the next game changer in the field of interest, it has to be really simplified so that either your son or your mother could understand it. So there were simplified things that we tried to put as part of our delivery messages, and that has been really helpful. I would still say that, it's one of those roads where you learn a lot from your mistakes as well. So picking the kinds of investors who you would want to speak to, always making sure in the audience, is there a technical person on the other side or not? Do you know of them or their work? Or is it completely somebody who's in general investing? And because around that, your pitch has to be tailored. And we've tried to do that a lot of times, but early on, I'm sure there were instances where we spoke a lot more about the technology where it was not needed, or we didn't speak enough where we could have done a little better, So I think that comes with continuing to do it. So taking every opportunity you get and honing it in every single time, and really being the best prepped person at that time in the room, knowing it. One of our strong advices, I think Anu will agree, from one of our YC partners was that on your topic of work, you should have knowledge that you could write the whole book about it. And that was Surbi, and she has said that repeatedly. I'm still trying to get there, but I'm building it ever which way I can.
Yeah, echoes on all of that. I mean, I think, and I do think female founders do face a disproportionate burden in healthcare to know more, and to communicate that calmly, maybe not all at once. I, like you, Ishita, I cannot look at my old pitches. It is painful, right? But I think that is the reality of pitching. You get better, and the way that you get better is by getting the reps in. I don't mean book 15 investor meetings tomorrow and like get the reps in that way. I mean, tell that story and tell it out loud, like film yourself Don't do the thing where you just say it in your head. You have to practice that delivery with a timer, with an audience, with your friend, with your co-founder, whoever will listen to you, because the way that you say things out loud will change, that will change how it sounds in your own head, and it will change how you tell the story. Because at heart, even the most technical company is a story from start to finish. And I think you have to, the way you get better at telling stories is by telling more stories. So I would 100% agree with that advice. It's probably my biggest piece of advice, is like, just say the pitch out loud. And I know I've got, I mentor through the FourthWave program as well. And I made my mentee, I joined a call, and then 2 minutes later, it's like, all right, give me the pitch. And it was like, oh, that's what we're doing right now. The other piece of advice that I would, talking about the pitching experience, I would say that not all investors are created equally, and they're not all the same. So doing your homework beforehand is really important, but also you don't have to convince every investor you talk to invest in your company. And frankly, you shouldn't. There are conversations that I have had where it is clear that the story around medical devices or cervical cancer or women's health or whatever it's going to be, we have a sort of global market strategy. If that doesn't resonate, if that story isn't for them, that's okay. I'm trying to get better, and something that YC really taught me is like, don't try to pitch to everybody. Qualify that up front. Do that research beforehand. It's better for everyone if you can say, hey, look, I looked at your portfolio and it looks like, I want to be clear, we're a medical device company with this regulatory path. So before I take a 30-minute pitch slot, I want to make sure that that's something that's actually in your wheelhouse. And defend your time on the other side, right? Like, I've had investors come to me and say, oh, I just want to learn about your space. We're not writing checks. And as hard as it is to close the door, at least at that point, I think everyone can respect when you say, hey, I'm in the middle of a pitch process, or I'm in the middle of a sprint, I'm in the middle of a product build, and I just can't do that right now. You don't have to say yes to everybody, just like everybody doesn't have to say yes to you. Yeah. So do your homework beforehand for both reasons. So you can be prepared for that call, but also so you can understand where this person fits in, because everyone will tell you, and it is so true, the investors that you bring on at the earliest stages, when you have the least experience pitching, are the ones that will stay on your cap table the longest. So, it's better to do that homework up front and to feel good about the relationship that you're building than it is to sort of wing it and just pray.
True. Can I add just one more thing? And in agreement to what Ori brought up, hey, this is my 7th pitch of the day. That's absolutely not acceptable from a founder's perspective. I think every time you are on a call, just to be respectful of other people's time, it's showtime, and you got to just go with it. So either don't plan a meeting where you're going to be exhausted, or if you have made that commitment of showing up, you have to show full authenticity and your promise to the company. So that's the job of the founding CEO or the CEO or whoever is making that pitch, and it's showtime at that moment.
I'd love to hear someone who's on their 7th pitch of the day be excited about it and come prepared with the research, knowing that they're in the right place and they're not just spraying and praying, wasting their time on people that aren't the great fit. And speaking of which, I think that's really awesome advice, and advice that we've tried to underscore in FourthWave to our founders who sometimes do have unsavory experiences, and you sometimes face a lot of discouragement, a lot of conflicting opinions about what you should be doing or including in your pitch or your business model. So I think it's really important to underscore that not every founder is for you, or not every funder is for you either, right? It's often said that it's a marriage, right? It's a long-term relationship when you take money, and you want to make sure that you're bringing on value-added investors who, at the very least, are not going to be making your life and your business more difficult. So that's very important. And then, of course, yes, being prepared, obviously being prepared. So I like to ask a question of all the panelists before we open it up for Q&A. If you do have Q&A in the audience, please do put it in chat. We may be able to, if time and tech allows with our earlier experience, we may be able to unmute you so you can ask the question yourselves, but I'm not making any promises yet. So do put them in the chat so we can at least acknowledge them. Okay, I see some coming in, great. But what I'd like to put out to all of the panelists is going back to what we said earlier around your why. And we'll start with the founders. So I'll send this one over to you to go first, Ishita. Tell us why you do what you do. What is the story of why you brought Microbials to market?
Yeah, so great question. We literally brought it out because we envisioned that the technology that we are developing has a way of addressing one of the global healthcare threats, which is drug-resistant infections. So we commonly know of different types of bacteria and fungi and essentially many different types of viruses that are being non-responsive to existing therapeutics in the market. What we realized is that women get shortchanged here as well. There are no novel therapies for women, especially for the disease that we are trying to address for the last 60 years or so. The same two antibiotics are being prescribed by physicians because they don't have anything else to give. And women in reproductive ages end up coming back to the clinic 4 times a year and either experiencing preterm births or miscarriages and a whole lot of other complications, including HIV and HPV and IVF failures, so on and so forth. So when we made some discoveries that we thought had a way of disrupting antimicrobial resistance, the first thing we came to was, can this actually have a solution for women in need? And because the program that we are at UC Davis is infant and maternal health driven, seeing good impacts for maternal health is directly proportional to seeing good reproductive outcomes in many ways, right? So we decided to take our technology and apply it to where we can make a change in women's lives. And so we started to think of our discoveries in a way of developing that clinically. Personally, for me, at this stage and age in my life, I've been doing science for so long. And when we started talking about, making a translational impact, what I started thinking of was, being a scientist, I can continue to do academic research for a really long time. But this is an opportunity where we can actually translate and make an impact on a much more bigger scale. And if that is the case, I'm going to do everything that is in my capacity to give it a shot and do my best at it. And that's my why, as to, number one, going after something that is really scientifically excellent, but that can also impact women. And, oftentimes I have had investment conversations. Well, they'll be like, are there personal stories? I'm like, if you're a woman, you know so many women who have had some or the other personal story associated with it. So even if it may not be mine, it does not matter. I know somebody or the other who's had a preterm birth, another person who's had a miscarriage, another person who's doing something else because they're not in a good, healthy place. So it's everybody's story, and that's where I'm coming at it from. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Ishita. We've known each other for a long time, and I just love what you're building. But I think every woman at some point has either themselves experienced or knows other people who have. As for us, I'm a medical device engineer and entrepreneur by training. I've been in this space for a long time, but I also, about 5 years into my time at a big medical device company, I moved to West Africa and worked in public health. And it was an unexpected career change. I wasn't expecting to be there for more than 3 months. Long story short, Ebola hit, and I ended up living in West Africa for 3.5 years. And I have always had a passion in global health. I've always wanted to see what we can do on the technology side to improve outcomes in global health. And so when I moved back to the US, right at that time, WHO, the World Health Organization, made a big announcement that we are going to eliminate cervical cancer in our lifetimes. And that is, for those of you that don't work in global public health, that is a huge deal. When you see that kind of commitment, when you see that kind of proclamation, it was a call to action specifically, like, we want technology to make this work. We frankly just don't get that many opportunities to innovate in global health itself.
Mm-hmm.
And cervical cancer is 95% preventable. It's the only cancer that we can prevent with a vaccine, detect at its pre-malignant state, and treat before it becomes malignant cervical cancer. So we have the entire pathway toward elimination, and yet it is the 4th largest cancer killer of women worldwide. Every 2 minutes, a woman dies of cervical cancer. And frankly, that it just feels unacceptable, right? Like, we have all of the things to do. This really is a question of how do we deploy those tools in a way that expands access to achieve the outcomes that we want. And it's not just, you know, we love the impact of the mission. We are, I think everyone on our team is very driven by that mission, but we also realize that when you focus on that many women, like if you can prevent millions of women from getting cervical cancer, and if you can do that in a way that makes clinics money, that's a huge market opportunity, right? So I think we get excited about both of those things, about building for clinics that don't really get devices made for them, that don't get technology made for them. And just the sheer number and volume of those clinics makes for a really exciting sort of design challenge for us.
Love that, Anu, rooting for you all the way.
I love that.
Awesome. And then Marianne on the investor side.
Yeah, so I started my career as a software engineer because I love coding. I fell in love with coding. I went to engineering school, and on my first day, I walk in my dress, and then I realize that I'm the only woman in this engineering class. And then I go through every single floor of this engineering building, and there was no woman out there. I'm like, well, where are the women in tech? I can't find them. And then throughout the next 4 years of my life, I found myself being the only woman in the engineering building on stage. I was one of the only women graduating. And then when I moved to Silicon Valley, I thought that it was going to change. Finally, there's going to be more women around me. But that was the same story for the next 15 years of my life. And it was a very isolating experience. So I've dedicated the majority of my career to empowering women in tech and in STEM. Most recently, when I was at MindBody, I was head of engineering for the SF office, and we were able to grow the engineering team from 7 to over 50 while maintaining a ratio of 55% women engineers. So building diverse team is possible when you really want to when you want to be intentional about it, it's definitely a possibility. So then I started my own company after MindBody to help companies hire more women engineers. And then my philosophy is that if you put a woman at a fast growing startup, her career is going to grow and we're going to get more women in leadership that are going to be more intentional about building more diverse teams. But then when I started this company, it grew really, really fast. And then I found myself being an entrepreneur by accident. I started going to all these different founder events. And then again, I would be the only woman in the room. I couldn't find any other women founders. So I'm like, well, where are the women founders? I can't find them. I want to build this community around me. So then I decided to start my own community. And just in a year, we grew really fast. And then now I'm reporting every week on all the different founder events happening in the Bay Area because for a long time, those events were so exclusive and it was keeping women out. That now a lot of these events have women in them because now women know about them. So that's really my why. It's to make tech more diverse. It's to change the conversation and make it that when people think about women coders, women engineers, or women founders, they think about all of us. So that's really my why.
Thank you for sharing that. And Ori, last but not least. Can't hear you. Did we do something on our end? Did the audio go down? Sometimes in the audio settings, it turns down.
Let's see. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Amazing. Sorry about that. I think my laptop just switched to audio for some reason. Okay, great. Alrighty. Well, quick why on me. So I was an economics student and you know, all my classes, we spent so much time hearing about the IPOs and the big winners and the Airbnbs and the Ubers. And similar to Marianne, I think I noticed there was a really big gap. Number one, people of color were not getting highlighted for all their efforts and all their work helping build some of these fantastic companies. And then number two, all of the investors fit the same profile. And I was a little curious as to why, when there are so many talented, I knew entrepreneurs, women in finance, so on and so forth. And so I think my path into VC, I like to call it a squiggle, because I loved venture in school, but I knew if I was going to be able to work with entrepreneurs, I had to have some type of background to help them answer the hiring questions, help connect them to the customers. How do you exactly sell to a massive enterprise, for example? And so I ended up spending some time at Bloomberg in New York for a few years and fell in love with fintech, fell in love with SaaS, hired a great team of 10. And I did that with the intention of eventually leaving, which was ironic. I think my parents were definitely a little shocked to hear that I wasn't gonna just, climb the corporate ladder, as I think a lot of entrepreneurs likely have to debate, that job security versus building their own company. And I think ultimately, to me, VC was my attempt at saying, hey, I want to bring more women into the room. I want more people of color to win across all fronts, whether that's venture, whether that's startups. And ultimately that led me to How Women Invest, where that is our sole goal and focus. As I mentioned, as early as your angel investing days to becoming an LP, to women who, were their first check. And then of course, for women hitting that growth stage, we're their backer at a point when, 23 women raise a Series A, 17 raise a Series B. Like, there's something bigger in the market, and it's the elephant in the room. But I think at this point, we're reaching a really good amount of funds and just exciting female managers that are ready to just help support and help these numbers grow, because it's not that there aren't enough women. I think there are plenty. Our thesis is really that there are enough teams and talented teams. And of course, we have all the data behind us that women build better companies, they run better teams, they return 43% more capital. So I think at the end of the day, yes, this is making a huge impact, but we're also a fund. So we know everyone wants to win in terms of the dollar signs as well. So we're super excited about all of this and then more. So that's really my why.
Nodding at each one of those. That's awesome.
Yes, it is awesome. And it's compelling. And I think that illustrates to those who are listening that when you do have that passion, that drive that helps you get through the vicissitudes and stick with it, you can really have a big impact and also impart confidence in your listener that you're in it for the long haul and you're the one for the job. So thank you for sharing that. I do see that there are women run healthier countries. Okay, right on. I'm going to reserve comment about ours right now for the sake of time. But okay, there are a couple of questions in the chat, and I just wanted to surface some of them. So I do see there was a question about a service-based company, and it looks like there was an answer. But I just also want to elevate that companies like Airbnb, like Uber, those are service-based companies, Thumbtack, right? So oftentimes a service-based business could potentially be a marketplace where there's other service providers. And so you may be the first service provider, but can you scale that by bringing on technology to leverage a market, using technology to create a marketplace, right? Leveraging technology for that. So I wanted to surface that. Okay, there was a question about the prevention versus promotion questions. And then also there's a question out to the founders about how long were you building your product or company before you sought venture capital. So I'll throw those two out there. And then if there are no other questions, I would like to try to get in one other question from for the investors.
So I can go in terms of the timeline. In theory, the program at UC Davis has been around for about 20 years, but my work literally started as part of one of the projects that we initiated literally to develop a translational product. So it was about 6 months prior to getting into Y Combinator, which was our first check. And that's what initiated our conversations with venture capital. At the same time, grant writing as well. So it was based on knowledge that we acquired for many years, but essentially, really translational work began just that same year that we got into YC, which was now 3 years ago.
Yeah, we were probably about 9 months old when we got into YC as well. And we had been building prototypes. I want to point out, there was, for a medical device company, we didn't start the company and then start collecting data. We had actually done some early benchtop work and built some prototypes. Like, we had done some pre-discovery work, and then focused on building out, what the plans could look like and doing some of the scoping. And as we started into YC following April, and really before that we had just raised from 3 or 4 angels. It really wasn't a lot of money. It was less than $100,000 in total, probably closer to like 50 to 60K in total. So it really wasn't until that point that we started taking more institutional money. But yeah, about a year. And there definitely, I will say this about fundraising, it definitely feels like it's in fits and starts times, right? It's not like a steady stream of progress. It's often you hit an inflection point, whether that's an external traction milestone or, doing another study if you're on the science or healthcare side, that often unlocks a lot more capital. And that can be right at the beginning, or it can be a little bit down the line.
I see there was a question from Jeremy about strategic business partners and what investors look for there. So I'll bundle that with my question for the investors as we round up this conversation. What are the things that founders should expect when they're going through the fundraising process? And can you kind of walk through the initial pitch versus follow-up and diligence? And if, for whatever reason, the founder is not funded, and I believe VCs have like a 99% no rate, right? So, or I don't know what it is for each of you, but should they keep in touch? And if so, how, or when should they just not keep in touch? So if we could, feel free to answer as you wish.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to start, and Marianne would love to build with you on this one. I think the process is going to be different for every fund, which I know isn't a super helpful answer, but as a whole, you can expect at least a meeting at some point with someone from the team. And I say that because certain funds will, put you through the ringer, speaking to 3 partners before getting to the actual decision maker. Our fund is unique. So once you apply on our website, our partners actually take a look at every single deck. And they're the ones who give the green light. Yes, we're going to go ahead and meet with this founder. And in your first pitch is actually directly to the partners and of course, someone like me in the background, helpful for the rest of the process, odds and ends. But I would say we're more of the exception to the rule. A lot of VC has been unfortunately built upon being, driven by being intentionally vague, being intentionally lengthy in certain responses and circling back. My response to that is you will know when a fund is excited. And if you don't feel that excitement right off the bat and you feel like it's taking forever to get your next meeting, I think Anu hit the nail on the head. I would question whether someone with that level of response and interest warrants being on your cap table. That being said, when and where you share your data room, I think I always caution to founders, like, make sure you set it up in, the DocuSign cloud and all that good stuff, because you want to make sure you get some data on how many times are people looking at your items, how long are they actually taking to go through your deck. And at the end of the day, in our book, you actually get someone to say, hey, we're going into due diligence. That is the traditional point at which you share the data room. I would say to any founder trying to send that whole package email right before the first meeting, I think sometimes folks set themselves up for essentially putting the cart before the horse, right? You didn't get to pitch yourself or the story, and now the investor is going to go ahead and make a judgment call off of all the data you just sent them. I think I'm a big fan of founders who send teasers, who send one-pagers, who send maybe the preview of the deck, just because there are folks who do like to prep in advance of these meetings, and it's helpful for us to know where exactly you're building, what questions we should ask. But in most cases, an investor asking for a up front, if anything, should be a red flag because they haven't really met you and built that rapport. And I would say that's also very personal, right? At that point, you're going to have your financials in there if they're applicable. You're going to have any of your IP and trademarks. And so I think for founders navigating the process, it's just really important to ask these questions up front, right? And if you're not sure when to share certain things, the right investor will say, hey, listen, we're not there yet. Would love to get to that. Let's make sure we do X, Y, and Z first. And, oftentimes some funds have this on their website, but in any case, I would also love to recommend founders to reach out to someone on their portfolio first, and just get kind of that knee-jerk reaction of, hey, I'm getting 3 meetings before even getting to a partner. Was that your experience? And if the portfolio founder says, hey, listen, they just have a really big fund and you're going to have to go through several hoops to get to the right person, so be it. But oftentimes I do find founders getting almost stuck in a little bit of a maze. And it's unfortunate because your time is so precious and so expensive that I don't think that maze to me is worth all those hoops, especially when some of these questions can be answered right up front, or you can just send a DM or email to someone in the portfolio and honestly get a lay of the land before you jump in head first. Because I think as both of the amazing founders highlighted, like fundraising is such a process. And I think VC intentionally still keeps it a little, vague just for the same reason of, certain folks get through those hoops. But I think the point, obviously, of my answer and even these panels is to help demystify it, right? I don't think the folks who go through all the hoops are necessarily the folks who deserve all the funding. I think sometimes inherently this industry is just built based on a lot of old tricks and tools, again, used in like the 70s before anyone had a MacBook to carry around. So if you ever feel like things are just feeling old and clunky, just remember VC used to be a cohort of folks in a car driving down University Ave and knocking on doors. And that is not the case anymore. I think Zoom and everything else has unlocked a way newer and more dynamic way, hopefully, of funding more women.
Ori, I love that. Sorry, I'm going to jump in there. I think there's so much temptation, particularly for technical founders, but I think overall in the earliest stages to like send everything, right? Send everything and they'll see how great I am. But it's like when you get a book that's 400 pages long and you've got 300 other things to do on your to-do list, you're not going to read 400 pages. You're going to read the back cover and see what, like everyone's got a set 24 hours in a day and they've got to decide how to use it. And I think we have to, as founders, you have to be really strategic about what, if you're only going to get 30 seconds of someone's time, what are the 3 things you really want them to know in that 30 seconds that will lead to that next conversation? I love that. I mean, it's such a good point. I also think for founders, you often do that out of fear of like, well, if they don't see how great I am at the beginning, then I'll never get my chance again. And I want to caution I know we have a lot of aspiring and early stage founders here. I want to caution you against that strategy because I don't think the long-term outcomes are what you want, right? I think it's still very needle in haystack to send everything and expect to get to the outcome that you want rather than being intentional and showing that you can cull things down and tell your story in a very succinct way, right? It's the beginning of a conversation, not a brain dump all at once.
Yeah. And always double clicking. Marianne?
I wanted to add one thing. So the female founders that I saw raise funding, the process that they followed is very similar. So they spent, a few months cultivating a list of investors. They added it in a CRM. That could be an Excel spreadsheet. They formed those relationships early on. And then they didn't tell them that they are raising funding. They just formed the relationship. Once they were ready to raise funding, they did that within a 3-month period where they then contacted the investors that they had already formed connections with. They asked to pitch to them. They scheduled maybe 8 meetings every day, just pitching. But what they did was very clever, is that they got the investors that were more likely to invest at the beginning of the process, where they got the first LOI, which is like letter of intent. They then use that LOI in every single pitch session to then get better rates and create FOMO between investors. So one of the trick here is to just make sure that when you are raising, do it in a short period of time. Don't take a year to raise because investors talk to each other, and if they see that you are having difficulty raising, then they are less likely to invest in your company.
Hey, well, we are at the end of the hour, but I do want to address the one question that came up quickly about raising from angels. Were those your own connections or were they from competitions or accelerators? And I think that was directed towards Anu.
Sorry, Mariah, I cut out just the middle part of your question there.
Okay.
Raising from angels versus accelerators.
No, they're asking, did you meet the angels through your own network or were they from accelerators or pitch competitions?
Yeah, they were actually from my own network and probably not in like, it wasn't like, oh, I have a list of really wealthy friends and family. I actually was really surprised at who came out of the woodwork to like, hey, I got, you know, this isn't, I'm not talking about, you know, $500,000. I'm talking about 25 and 30 and 40K checks at the very, very beginning.
So this came from
You
like
know, I had people in my
RBC or
network. Yeah, and it was like, oh, you're building something new. I'd love to support you in that process. Or, hey, I've worked with you in the past and I'm really excited to see, you know, it's like, oh, I see a job change for somebody that I used to work with. So three of them were people that I had worked with in the past. And one of them was an old friend who also came from my program, my undergrad program.
Awesome. Thank you so much for squeezing that in. Ladies, I could do this all afternoon with you, and I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to connect. I look forward to keeping in touch. This is just one of the wonderful benefits of being in this industry, is the incredible people that we have the pleasure of working with. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom, your insights. Thank you to all of you for joining us for Global Entrepreneurship Week and FourthWave's Founders and Funders panel, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take care all.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Great job, ladies. Bye.